And, everybody calls us the Cinderella team, but I'll tell you, our defense was not a Cinderella team. We were seasoned. Most of those guys that were on that team had played a lot their sophomore and their junior years. They've been on the field a lot. They learned a lot. They were tough-minded guys and ready to play, and they were not going to take anything there. Even though Houston had scored 100 points the year before, we were going to stop them. And Gene knew how to do it, and that's what we did.
Steve Tannen?
Well, I, as a defensive back, I was more concerned with Elmo Wright because he was their big gun. Oh, jeez. He was their big gun, and so I was more thinking about that. I felt confident that our linebackers and linemen could handle the veer option. They were obviously very successful and looked forward to a great season. But I think this happens to a lot of teams when they're picked high or people have a lot of expectations for them. And things don't go right at the beginning. You can kind of tell the character of the team. Now, I can't remember what happened to Houston the rest of the season, but I think back about, when Florida played in that 2006, I think it was, the national championship game, and the first kickoff, they kicked Ohio State. They run it back for a touchdown. But the Gators came back and just, trounced them after that. Well, I don't think Houston was ever ready to recover. And basically our team was defensively, when your offense is clicking, you're just having fun. And I think from the offensive standpoint, when everything they do is turn into gold, you're having fun too. So it's hard to stop a team when you're having fun.
I'd like to pick it up there and just to set the stage. And I do want to make one point too, especially for our new listeners out there and some of our younger listeners, non-old school listeners. Houston of that era was not the Houston of today. Today, Houston is a mid-level Conference USA team. In those days, Houston was an independent, high-powered team. Humiliated people, beat people 60, 70, 80 points. As you guys said, put 100 on Tulsa the year before. High-powered offense. Guys like Elmo Wright, Robert Newhouse, a bunch of guys that played in the pros, and they came in ranked number 1 by Playboy. So, okay. All right, so next thing you know, before the explosions ended, it's 35-0 just before halftime. Can you guys tell us a little bit about what it was like at halftime after you went in there? But John wants to say something first.
Well, I just wanted to
John
say
Reeves.
they were in the Southwest Conference then. So they played Oklahoma, Texas, and all of those guys, and they had been champions the year before of the Southwest Conference. Arkansas was in that conference as well then, too.
Yep. So they were a big bad team, more so than the Houston program today. But I'd just like to hear what that locker room was like. You hear for all summer long about how big underdogs you guys and how bad you're going to be, and now you've got the number 1 team 35-0 at half.
It's pinch me. Pinch me. Is this real? Is this real? The grin started at halftime and didn't really let up the whole rest of the game. It's hard to remember exactly what it was like in there, but we were excited. But as all coaches will tell you, don't get overconfident. You got to play a whole other half of football, and indeed they tagged a bunch of points on us in the second half, but we kept scoring.
Yeah. There's one thing, Roger, I think people don't remember about Ray Graves. Ray Graves was never afraid to put his second team in once he got up, even by a little bit. He always wanted to give those kids more experience, and that's what happened. He put in his younger kids. Jimmy Barr went in the second quarter, intercepted a pass, and went all the way back with it.
Another sophomore.
Yeah, and that's the way it was. So, why did we have 35 points? We were letting kids play. We're having fun, like Steve said.
And one more thing about that Houston game, which I think was the kickoff to a very special season, was oftentimes in sports a team will pull a big upset and it's a singular event. Yes. It doesn't carry on to the rest of the season. Yep. Oftentimes they get upset themselves the second game because they put everything into the upset. This particular game, this magical thing that you did, seemed to carry over and lead to a very magical, wonderful season.
Yes.
I don't think that we. Excuse me, but I don't think that we thought going into. I don't think we thought going into the season that, oh my God, this is just really something else. This first game is Houston. What we thought was, we don't know really what we have. Defensively, we're really confident we can play with anybody. Offense looks like, hey, we could have something really good here. And then we went out and proved it in the first half. And so at halftime, we were like, oh, well, we had a reason to be confident, and that kind of carried us through. That's why we didn't have the big letdown after that game. First of all, we didn't put extreme pressure on winning that game, and it just that game just told us that what we thought was happening with us was really happening. It wasn't wishful thinking. We had the horses, and so we went on from there.
Just a great mix, as we've said before, of great senior and veteran players who'd had a lot of experience under your belts, coupled with some really fresh, exciting new blood that happened to be explosive offensive guys and a new offensive coordinator and a new offense thrown into the mix along with it.
And I have to say one thing. I want to give John Reeves credit. That week, John Reeves was National Back of the Week in the AP, UPI, and Sports Illustrated. First time that ever happened.
And Carlos Alvarez set the single game receiving yardage record in the first game he ever played.
I think he caught 3 TDs too, didn't he?
Yeah.
But you know what
Something
happened
like
in that game? The student body came out, you guys remember, and formed a tunnel for us to run through on the way back out in the second half.
Yeah, yeah.
That was something special.
Yeah.
And one other thing that I noticed as a fan back in those days, you guys came out with new uniforms, and I thought that added a special quality to you guys too. In fact, you were wearing white at home and an orange helmets, which
Yes.
something that Gators certainly hadn't seen during the era that I'd been following football. Was that something that you guys were aware of, or is there any story behind the orange helmets and the white jerseys at home?
I think the white jerseys were and maybe I've got it wrong, but it's always easier when it's hot to play in white than it is in dark blue.
Yeah.
And I think Coach Graves was smart enough to just say, hey, we'll just wear white all year long. And that worked out fine for us. We had a great time with it.
Made us look bigger, too.
Yeah. I looked like I was 6'7".
And speaking of which, Rain Griffith is here, and he's actually brought his blue jersey along with it. And those of you who will see the video of this, hopefully we'll get a shot of that. But before we go, guys, we're up on our next break. Let's take another quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about a few more things that make the Super Softs and the entire 1968 Gators, 669 Gators special. And then in our final segment, we'll talk about that big upset over Tennessee and that dramatic final game of the 69 Gators. So, guys, stay with us. You're listening to Talkin Old School